the opposing worldviews. So when one dips his finger into the philosophical world, he can see a stark contrast from even the Enlightenment era philosophers, definitely from the Middle Age philosophers, but when you go all the way back to ancient Greece, you see a repeating process of four major categories of worldviews that are opposed to the Christian Catholic worldview. And they basically fall into, well, let me just describe them initially. So the first worldview that that many of the pre-Socratic philosophers believed in, like Parmenides, who really began this concept, was monism. And of course, spiritual monism is a concept that there's only one substance in the universe, kind of like Hinduism, right? And we're not really here. Since there can be no change in the universe, there's only one substance to remain unchanged. So therefore, there's no human nature. There's no katholikos, as Plato said, which would be the universal forms of all things, planets, giraffes, humans. There's no such thing as universal forms. There's only one. And that spiritual oneness makes everything that we see here as a simulation, illusory, and not real. Okay. The second worldview is dualism. And the easiest way to implement or describe the manifestation of dualism is Plato's Republic. And for the East, it would be the Daiji or yin-yang symbol in Taoism, right? And that would be there are two co-eternal equals, two co-eternal equal substances, one that's uncreated and one that opposes the spiritual substance, right? And both are co-eternal, though. So some worldviews say that the created substances, like the deities and the humans, are created, yet they exist eternally from a substance separate from the eternal Tao. Very odd. Well, Plato really describes the great monad, and it's not a person in this dualistic worldview. It is a divine essence, okay? And this divine essence possesses all the forms of things in his mind, in which he called the logos, right? And he maintains the uniformity of nature from outside of time and space, outside of the world of forms. But the cycle of the universe destroys everything. Sinner, murderer, and saint all alike end up, even if they break out of transmigration, reincarnation, they end up annihilated. But their substance left over is what is used to make the new forms and the new things in the next cycle of the cosmos. Okay, that's dualism. There's other examples and other branches within dualism, but we can go on to the third one, which is atomism. Okay, and atomism is a concept where there is no great monad. There is nothing after this life. There's only this life and this world and this substance and this material world, and there ain't nothing else. Okay, so they don't believe in eternal forms. And some sects of atomism believe in basically two major branches. One is a deterministic worldview and one that possesses a free will, which is kind of odd, because if you're part of a predetermined outcome of atoms falling through space, not atoms as in the modern use of the scientific term, but particles that fall through space that give the illusion of form, then really you don't have personhood because you don't have form at all. So how can you have will without personhood and identity? So this atomistic worldview has crept its way into the modern era and has influenced people like David Hume and Karl Marx. Karl Marx believed in a deterministic nature of these atoms or atomism of the material substance throughout the history of mankind. And it's been evolving towards a utopian outcome through a dialectical materialistic tension. So don't think that these crazy ideas died in the ancient time period. They worked their way back in as soon as Western civilization, right around the Enlightenment era, began to abandon deeper understandings of Catholic philosophy, like St. John of Damascus, like Thomas Aquinas, like St. Justin Martyr, Augustine. They began redeveloping these Gnostic concepts again and tried to interpret them into a Christian worldview. And when they failed at that, they abandoned the Christian worldview and stuck with anything other than that, really. I mean, when you look at Schopenhauer, he was depressed and almost committed suicide, and he says that studying Buddhism is what saved his life. But Buddhism believes in the same dualistic concept that you're going to end up annihilated at the end of the cosmic age. So what is there to look forward to? Why not, like Epicurus said, live for today? Because Epicurus was at that point too. There's no life after this, so live for today. Why shouldn't I F people up and take their stuff? Well, I go to jail. So what? Then I die. Then what? Well, what if I'm a saint? You still end up annihilated. So why would Schopenhauer and other Enlightenment era and even German philosophers believe in such a tripe? Because they didn't know what a true, congruent, logically consistent worldview that the Christian worldview produces, if it's understood right. And of course, the fourth one is pragmatism. And I would say probably the first pragmaticist was somebody like David Hume, which wanted to abandon all metaphysics, right? How do you know what you know is what metaphysics is. How do you know? What's your appeal to authority to verify your epistemological outcome, right? If all knowledge is not necessarily true, then what's your sifting mechanism in order to find out what is true and what's not? That's where your metaphysical understanding of the world came from. Well, he said all metaphysic books should be consigned to the flames. He wanted nothing to do with that. He only wanted to deal with what I see in front of me and how does it fill my refrigerator. Okay, so those four worldviews, think about this. They are a negation of not just Christianity, but the Christian God. That is a person. He's not a thing, a general divine essence. He's not a monad, like Pythagoras would say, that produces the dyad. That's the doorway into the world of forms and produces the triad. He's not a thing. He's a person. If he's not a person, it's just a thing, then that means there was no intention to create humans because willing something into existence is a byproduct of personhood. It's a byproduct of nature, but the nature of personhood is to have a will is the point. You can't have personhood and not have a will. So determinism is out the window with that worldview. So if you negate personhood, that means everything that we exist, that we see exist, and our existence isn't accidental. So how destructive do you think any one or the collective of those worldviews, how destructive is that going to be in a Christian society? We know how destructive it is. Look where we're at right now. The total abandonment of the necessity to maintain as guardians the continuity of our civilization. And now they want to do horrible things to our kids and change their identity, change what they were born as. They've run amok. And it seems like everybody's standing around like a deer staring in the headlights and they don't know what to do. So even these atheists like Richard Dawkins, is my point, knows and recognizes and is honest enough to say, look, I don't believe in God. But if you don't want to see Western civilization be destroyed, you have to maintain Christian society because Christian society is what produced the virtues where we can justify saying you shouldn't kill somebody. Well, an atheist, or let's just say a person that doesn't truly believe in some type of a punishment, he'll just say, don't kill anybody and get caught. That's a total different worldview. So these opposing worldviews are found within, like I said, the Immanuel Kant, the David Humes, the Baruch Spinoza, Nietzsche, just go on and on. All Schopenhauer I mentioned. These all lead to a nihilistic outcome. They speak like describing a cake or even drawing a cake, but they don't produce the cake. They themselves did not produce Western civilization. Yet they stood on the shoulders of Western civilization to critique it and try to redirect it. And so even if not one of them, if you have somebody in an American experience like the American philosophy or Americanism like John Locke, even he produces a contradictory worldview. He says there are no innate things. And the next minute he says you have inalienable rights, God-given. Well, which one is it? If there are no innate things, there's no such thing as inalienable rights. Because inalienable rights presuppose they are part of your human nature. Especially when you also espouse within your philosophy that there are no innate things. That's what innate means. So That's where we realize there has to be a better answer on how to fight back against the intentional deconstructionism going on, not just with our culture, but when you have whack jobs going out calling for white replacement, white demographic replacement, like what Owen Benjamin was caught saying in this past week or so. Hurry up. Somebody please hurry the process. I thought we were getting rid of these people. He's talking about us. And his hand got caught in the cookie jar where he opened his big mouth and he just exposed his entire agreement with the process. Right? So why is there not more being done? Well, like I said before, every concept has to be known and understood within multiple other concepts. It's contextual. And that's why a form of politic also will manifest differently from one country to another. But it still should possess the same nature. That nature doesn't change. Its temperament may be different when, say, a nationalistic worldview or politic is manifested in Spain as opposed to Italy, as opposed to Britain or America. But it's still the nature of it. And the nature should be fight back and survive. Apologetically, yes, but by force and if necessary. But you're not going to have the conviction to do that if you yourself don't have access to these universal truths, these universal forms of understandings of things. Again, like Plato said, the katholikos, it refers to unchangeable principles that come down from the mind of God, the logos, and they're maintained in the scientific process of induction, because the scientific process uses induction, including political science, to have a certain level of predictability within your human experience. And the only way to do that is to understand that there is a uniformity in nature. And when we have that predictability and that uniformity of nature applied towards the inductive process, then you can draw a conclusion for a future time of predictability. Same thing with politics, not just biology. Okay, so I just get a little tired of hearing people screech and use the slogan of Christian nationalism where they don't understand how to describe that. They don't understand how to describe Christianity, Catholicism, what a nation is, what nationalism is, and how it takes on a different form that's not objective. It's not objective in its application. It should be subjective. It should very much be subjective. How can you be objective and laissez-faire about your survival and your family's survival? Therefore, you should be subjective. But your discovery of objective truths that exist in the mind of the logos are discoverable. How you implement them and protect them is subjectively, right? Avoid the neutral position is the point.